Lightning Arrow did yet again dodge all nerfs, unlike Tornado Shot. Hey, I'm Cyclon, and today I want to share with you not just one, but two Lightning Arrow leveling or League Start guides. Now, the main difference between those two guides is going to be one is using Artillery Ballista, the other one is using Manaforged setups. Personally, I'm tending more towards the Manaforged setup. They do feel a bit smoother, but both setups are viable. The Artillery Ballista has higher single target potential, but you need to place the ballistas, and the Manaforged setup feels a bit better in mapping, especially once you swap out of the rain skills into Burning Arrow and Scourge Arrow of Menace, you have just better coverage. So it really comes down to preferences which one you should choose. What I recommend is you take a Deadeye, get some Lightning Arrow gear, run through the campaign with one, run through the campaign with the other, and then once you've run both with the campaign, maybe do a few maps and see what feels better for you and what you would prefer more to use. Now, I'm going to be leaving you with both POBs in the description. They are containing several trees, several gem setups, and several item setups. If something isn't aligning, like you're missing intelligence, you're missing strengths, you're missing resistances or spell suppression, check if you're using the right tree with the right skill gem and with the right item setup. And if that is the case and there's still something lacking, please message me and I will fix it as fast as possible. You can message me with the comments. I read every single comment. You can message me on Discord via DMs or the designated channel. In this case, it's build discussion. Or I will still try to be live on every day until launch and of course after launch as well. So if anything is amiss, you can message me via Twitch when I'm live streaming as well. But that being said, let's get into the guide. Now, let's start with the Pantheon and the Bandits. As we are using precise technique, we don't really care about Elira or however she's pronounced. The resistances are nice, but we don't really need the mana regen and we don't really need the crit multi because we just can't use it at that stage. Instead, what we want to use is we want to kill all bandits because passive points are very important to us. So we grab those. For our Pantheon, early on you should be using the Soul of the Brine King and get the freeze immunity with the Divine Vessel. Once you've gotten that, you also want to grab Avarice with the Burning Ground immunity. And once you have avoidance, like generic elemental avoidance of 100%, we can drop Soul of the Brine King, instead grab Soul of Lunaris, and we want to use up to 3 Divine Vessels, preferably unlock everything on her. It's everything that we get with the Divine Vessel on Lunaris is very good to have. Now, usually I would go over the tree in detail, but the tree hasn't really changed. It is fairly self-explanatory. I'm going to be noting something for the Sensi in a moment, but on the tree generally, what you need to note is you want to have projectiles, you want to have pierce because of Lightning Arrow, which I explain in a moment as well. You want to have life, a bit of mana, you want to have onslaught on kill. If you're the totem variant, you want to have watchtower, you want to have charisma for spell suppression, you want to have a source of leech, and a bit of life on hit, on mana on hit, and then a good amount of elemental damage, crit chance, bow damage, crit multi, whatever scales you build. Like I said, the tree, I have several tree stages. They are stage by stage. I'm going to be making a separate video for the both leveling variants in one video combined. So that's going to be hopefully out tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. But for now, the tree is very self-explanatory. For the Sensi, there's one thing we need to discuss, and that is Assassin's Mark versus Sniper's Mark, and if we should be picking up Focal Point. Now, because of Lightning Arrow's interaction with Returning Projectile and Pierce, the answer for Focal Point and Assassin's Mark is both yes. Sniper's Mark did got a nerf, and at least as far as I've tested, if you utilize Sniper's Mark and you shoot your Lightning Arrow on an enemy, the Lightning Arrow will hit the enemy. Sniper's Mark say you Pierce, so Pierce has priority, you Split has priority over Pierce, so you shoot, you split the arrow and it doesn't go through the enemy, meaning that it cannot return, as the returning projectiles after they split are going sidewards, they're not going to be hitting the enemy as they go back. So instead we're going to be using Assassin's Mark, which you have then, once you are out of a precise technique, once we are in the crit swap, we use Assassin's Mark, and then the arrow pierces the enemy, and it comes back, it deals its damage, it's likely gonna crit again because of Assassin's Mark, and we're gonna have the high single target. Also, the rain skins cannot benefit from pierce, and we have other sources of increased damage taken, so we aren't reliant on Sniper's Mark. I do include a Tornado Shot of Cloudburst variant in both POBs, which is purely optional, of course. It's not made to, it has to be in this final version of it. That is an optional variation that I personally like, but I get that not everybody is a fan of the Tornado Shot of Cloudburst with Fury Wolf. It has its downside as well. For that specifically, Focal Point or Ricochet are both good, and we are still going to be using Sniper's Mark, but with the changes to Sniper's Mark, Ricochet for additional clear feels better. Just wanted to quickly mention that. Alright, so Lightning Arrow with Pierce is going to be important because a returning projectile then guaranteedly hit again if they're always going to be flying in a straight line. Now, getting to the important part, to the item section. I have included several item gears, starting with the default, which is things that you can look for in campaign if you get some early chaos, or maybe you want some high items. Maybe it's your secondary build, you're watching this not at league start but a bit later. Those are good items to have while leveling. And then we get to early gear and then onwards crit swap. There is not really big of a difference between early gear and crit swap. So I will be focusing on crit swap as the main explanation point for the gear, and then later on the stages we want to upgrade with. So, we're gonna be wanting a decent bow. As we are a 3 elemental build, we utilize Trinity, we want a bow to have all 3 elemental types of damage. Normally we would be focusing fire and lightning damage, but I have something that also wants us to have a decent cold damage. So you should be aiming to have an equal weighting of damage, or maybe a slightly higher cold damage, but you should still have a high fire and a high lightning damage as well, so rather having equal than focusing on one stat. We then want to craft attack speed on the bow, and that should be enough early. Once we have critical strikes in our build, so once we're not on precise technique, we do want to also have crit chance on our bow, and the preferred bow bases are bone bow, ivory bow, or spine bow. All 3 bases have a very high crit chance and a good attack speed of 1.5. Other bases either have a lower attack speed or have a lower crit chance. So these are the perfect bases. There is one difference in these 3 bases, but that is literally only flat physical base damage, which we do not care about as we are an elemental or 3 elemental build. So the 3 bases are equally good for us. The Quiver, the main reason why we do care a little bit about cold damage, is Aroana's Bite. This Quiver has not been talked a lot about, but it is very, very powerful. It is more powerful than a Poised Prism, so if you don't need the resistances, this one offers a lot of damage. Now, this also offers a source for increased damage taken, meaning that the reliance on Sniper's Mark as a main increased damage taken, basically meaning it's a bigger modifier. This one offers increased damage taken. This means Sniper's Mark would already be less good for this variation of a lightning arrow build. And our Bite also on top of that offers flat cold damage. Usually good implicits are cheap, so we can grab a decent implicit, we can grab flat cold, we get a cold rest, and we can get a bigger chill effect, meaning the enemies are more slowed, meaning a little bit better survivability and better damage. Now, during testing, I usually saw about 20% chilled on most enemies, including bosses, so it felt really, really good for me. Then, most of our gear in the early stage are very simple. Our helmet, body armor, and belt should include life, resistances, and stats. Our boots should include life and resistances, but also movement speed. So what you want to look here for is a high movement speed with decent resistance boots, and then craft movement speed or craft life on it. For the rest of the gear, or well, on any of those spots, on helmet, body armor, or boots, we also want a 10% spell suppression roll that allows us to spend 1 passive point to 2 passive points less and still be spell suppression capped, meaning it's just a bit more efficient on our tree and gear. Now, for our amulet, we have 2 early options, though likely it's only 1 now. Yoke of Suffering got a buff in the recent league, or with the new upcoming league, from 5% increased damage taken to 10% increased damage taken. Assuming we have 20% chill effect and Honest Bite, it's already 20%. We are 3 elementals, so we basically always apply chill, shock, and burning on an enemy, or ignited on an enemy. meaning a yoke gives us 30% increased damage taken on top of our 20, that's a 50% increased damage taken. That is very powerful if we can afford a yoke. It could be that yoke is going to be very expensive next league, which would then mean that we are going to be sticking with our early choice, which would be a high risk truth, giving us crit multi once we are on the crit stage, and before that gives precision with high accuracy, and culling strike for free for all our attacks. That is a good early choice, but a yoke should be the preferable choice. Our rings of choice are going to be tailwings. They are very powerful, giving us a lot of elemental resistances and also increased damage, so they're just really good rings to have. Keep in mind that you can always buy the 3 barrack rings instead of a taming, as the barrack rings are usually combined cost cheaper than one taming on its own, and you also have a chance to get a decently rolled taming. Most of the times we do get unlucky and bad rolls. Our flask should be a jade, a quicksilver, a diamond, and a flex spot. Now, this really is based on your preferences. So the jade already gives us evasion, quicksilver movement speed, diamond a crit chance. If you are still on a precise technique tree, we're gonna use a sulfur instead of a diamond flask. And on the last spot, there are a few options. You can use a silver flask for getting more consistently onslaught. You can use a granite flask for armor. Or you can use what I currently think feels really nice is an amethyst flask for some chaos res. Our life flask of choice should be either terrified or a high better tier of that, meaning we have increased instant recovery when we are on low life, but the amount of real life recovered is a bit lower. But because we already have instant leech and we have also just general leech and life on hit, we're usually only using a life flask when we take a very big hit. That usually brings us to low life, so having more recovery on low life or instant recovery on low life usually instantly sets us to full life again. So we don't need the alarming that is always instant recovery but recovers a lot less life. Our preferable suffix on this flask is granting a bleed or corrupt blood immunity when used while being in one of these states. Then we are immune to the respective state for 6 seconds. Once we get to higher investments, one thing that we want to early on get is we want to get decent flasks. So I recommend to get 3 of your flasks crafted with charges when you're hit by an enemy. And then for the suffixes would be evasion, effectiveness of curse, and if you're using a granite it would be armor. If you're using a silver it could be attack speed, or it could be some resistances if you're lacking or whatever you prefer. If it's not on a granite flask I wouldn't recommend the armor one. Or you could use a force unique, you could use a unique flask in that spot. Again, the force spot is a bit more flexible, but one of the flasks should have the suffix increased critical strike chance, and I like to drop the diamond flask and instead grab a stibnite flask, get the increased crit strike chance as a suffix on it, because again it means more evasion, it means more survivability in a map. And then on the prefix on this flask that has crit chance as a suffix, we want to get flask charge when you deal a critical strike, so that the uptime on a boss can be a little bit better. Or when we are just run out of the flask because we use it on full life, and we get to the boss, we do a few hits, we crit, we get enough charges, we can use it again, and then we have our crit chance for the boss fight. That is usually feeling pretty decent to have. Otherwise, the gear, of course, gets upgrades as well. Now, after we gotten our flask crafted, we have our charges on full, and we are happy with them, we should be looking at our bow next. Upgrading from our previous bow, we still want a 3 elemental bow, we still want crit chance and attack speed, we just want higher rolls on this. You should be looking for anything between 1100 elemental DPS all the way to 1300 elemental DPS. +1 or +2 arrows is a nice thing to have, but at this stage of the game, or when you're getting to the stage of the build, it's not really necessary. Our quiver, however, that one we can already go a bit more ham on it. We can get flat lightning, we can get crit multi, life, damage with bows, and then either craft a missing resistances, a missing stat or attack speed on it. And if we want to really invest into the quiver, we can also grab a +1 arrow on it. Now, those already, the bow damage, the crit multi, the flat lightning, that will outscale Arno's bite quiver, but before that, the bite quiver will still be feeling very good. Now, getting to the defensive gear. I prefer my helm to have a high intelligence roll, because either way, if we go for Omni, if we go for magic finding, if we go for any variation of bow build, we usually need a decent amount of intelligence, at least 111 to get the level 20 crit damage support in our build. So we always gonna need some int on a bow build, and I prefer to have it on one source, and the helmet offers itself up pretty nicely to be that source. So the helmet I like to have Chaos Res, Spell Suppression, and Intelligence. We can get that via Fracture, rolling an essence for 1 and getting the last one. Keep in mind that on evasion basis can naturally only roll dexterity. So to get intelligence on the helmet, we do need an essence to get that in there. For the prefixes, we can get evasion rating, life, and also a really nice prefix to have is physical damage taken from hits taken as fire damage, as it's just giving us a little bit additional physical max hit. Now, the body armor would be the second item I would craft. The body armor should be crafted, again, being on a fractured basis with Chaos Res. Then you get preferably fractured Chaos Res or Spell Suppression using Essence of Strength. I forgot the exact strength of that. Again, just like Int, we do need a source of strength for the build. We're gonna need some strength to fit our auras in, especially if you want to use Determination for high survivability. There is armor offering up a nice suffix, an open suffix to get strength in, so we would be using the essence for strength. We would get Chaos Res, Spell Suppression on it, and then we can either early on we can craft Elemental Avoidance, then we can get 20% avoidance on our tree, and we can get either an icon implicit avoidance or any essence of loathing avoidance on our boots, and use an ancestral vision to get avoidance capped, so we can swap off Soul of the Brine King to Soul of Lunaris, and later on we want to use an Veiled Orb to get unveiled avoidance on our body armor, so that we can combine 30% on body armor, 50% on boots, with the 20% on the tree to get then fully avoidance, so we can get the jewel spot freed up again. And if we get unlucky on the unveil and we unveil percentage life, then we can craft avoidance, and we just need more avoidance on our boots, which is why we want to craft the body armor before the boots. If we get the avoidance unveiled, then we can craft fist damage taken as elemental, and that is also again a really nice stat, especially if we combine it with the one on the helmet. And later we can even maybe get a Taste of Hate in, then that is 12 plus 8 are 20, and Taste of Hate is 35, so we already take 35% physical damage taken as elemental, which we can way easier mitigate than physical damage. The gloves of choice, as I have left them out intentionally, are basically the same with the entirety of the game. Shadow and Dust are very powerful gloves, giving us access to Rampage, Crit Multi, and Crit Chance, and usually getting a good implicit such as base crit or +1 frenzy charge on them is fairly cheap. So we should always be looking to grab one of these pairs up early, as they are, again, fairly cheap early, and they do rise eventually over the duration of the league. So for the boots next, after we crafted the body armor, after we grabbed the helmet, the boots. The boots should have the following. Again, should be Fractured Spell Suppression or Chaos Resistance. Then we use an Essence of Loathing for avoidance, and we roll them till the suffixes are done. We then can use Reforged Speed because of the nerf to Veiled Chaos Orbs no longer existing. We can use a Reforged Speed, get any movement speed, craft life, or roll them, get a decent life prefix on them, and then craft movement speed. But preferably the best outcome would be getting a Veiled Orb on it to get movement speed and more movement speed if we haven't been hit recently, while of course having a suffix can be changed on it. And then we can craft life on the boots, and the boots are going to be very good. And on the implicits we want 21% of a chance to avoid elements and increase attack speed. This should be the third tier of elemental avoidance. You can technically also do with the second tier with 20. Now, again, based on what you get on your armor, if you have crafted avoidance on your armor, you need 55% avoidance on your boots, which will require the 30 of avoidance on the implicit and the Deafening Essence of Loathing. If you just need the 50% avoidance, you can do with the second tier of implicit and a Deafening Essence of Loathing. If I say anything wrong, feel free to call me out, and I'm gonna be editing, keeping a note in the description of the video and in the pinned comment that I said something wrong here. Now, the amulet, I already said, Highest Truth is a really good amulet, but eventually want to be a yoke. This would be now the point where we definitely want to stay on a yoke. Yoke is a massive increase in damage, and it's very good. We can still keep the tamings. We could technically already upgrade to rare rings, but if you don't know which direction to go, having tamings is very powerful. And if you have enough elemental resistance that you can drop one taming, getting a Death Oath or Death Rush, that's the name, a Death Rush, for Adrenaline into the build is again a nice movement speed and damage boost, although a temporary one. Now your build is at this point likely still a temporary build with the fixing resistances and stats, but eventually you would like to have either a Headhunter or Mageblood here, depending on the playstyle you prefer. If the build requires a lot of, if the next league requires a lot of damage, a Headhunter might be better, otherwise a Mageblood for the additional speed can be a very good option. But yeah, that is basically the gear upgrades that you want to go with. I'm going to be leaving you with the POB again in the description. I'm going to be very quickly covering your main gem setups. Your main 6th link is going to be Lightning Arrow, as based on the name of this guide. It's going to be Lightning Arrow linked with Returning Projectiles and Mirage Archer, having Trinity, elemental damage with attacks for damage, and Inspiration to keep the mana cost down. Now, on the Ballista version, you want to have Artillery Ballista with added Cold, Focus Ballista, Inspiration, elemental damage with attacks, and increased crit damage. Increased crit damage is going to be your 6th link. On a 5th link, you're likely going to have Life Tip instead of Inspiration. And if you are still going to be killing big bosses, such as Eater of World as being Exarch, consider using a faster attack support instead of Focus Ballista support, as that's going to allow your ballistas to attack on their own. And you can instead focus on staying alive in the big boss fight more than standing still and attacking the boss. For the Manaforged variant, your preferable secondary 6th link is going to be a Storm Rain, Blast Rain, both in the same 6th link, linked with Manaforged Arrows, Life Tap, and Concentrated Effect. If it's a 6th link, you can add added cold damage to it. Now, if you get into a later stage, you can replace the Rain skills, and instead you can grab Burning Arrow and Scourge Arrow of the Menace, both helping you with additional clear and still okay enough single target. You're going to be linking that with a Manaforged Arrow and a Returning Projectile, as well as with a Life Tap and an Awakened damage or a normal elemental damage with attack support. All that being said, have a wonderful day, and I'll be seeing you in my next guide. Goodbye.